now take the steering for this meeting of the Finance and Corporate Resources Committee held on the 16th of November 2022. I can see that we have present Councillors Allison, Councillor Brogan, Councillor Matthew Buchanan, Councillor Carmichael, Councillor Chalmers, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Cowan. Do we have Councillor Devlin present today? No. I can see that we have Councillor Dewar, Councillor Donnelly. Do we have Councillor Fagan?
No.
No, Councillor Fagan. I can see that we have Councillor Ferguson. Do we have Councillor Ferguson Miller? Sorry, yeah, I can see that she has joined remotely. We have Councillor Handybode. We have Councillor Horn. Do we have Councillor Hose? No. I can see that we have Councillor Loudon. I have apologies from Councillor Hugh MacDonald, and we have Councillor Salamati substituting. I can see that we have Councillor Councillor McClyman. We have Councillor Leslie MacDonald. I have apologies from Councillor McDougall. We have Councillor McGeever. I have apologies from Councillor Nelson, and we have Councillor Lockhart substituting. We have Councillor Razak. I have apologies from Councillor Ross, and we have Councillor Nugent substituting. And we also have Councillor Scott present. Councillor Keat, I can see that you are in the meeting. Can you confirm who you're substituting for, please?
Councillor Devlin. I'm substituting for Councillor Maureen Devlin.
That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, and we also have a number of officers present today. I'll hand back to yourself, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Carol. Do we have any declarations of interest? No? Can I refer you to the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 7th of September? That's pages 5 to 18 in your pack. Can these minutes be approved as a correct record?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thanks. Minutes of the appeals panel held on the 22nd of September, 25th of October and 1st of November, pages 19 to 24. Can these minutes be approved as a correct record, please?
I'll second that, Chair.
Minutes of the recruitment committee held on the 9th and 20th of September and also the 24th of October. That's pages 25 to 30 in your pack. Can these be approved as a correct record?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5, revenue budget monitoring, 22-23, pages 31 to 40. Lorraine, can I ask you to speak to this, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Committee. Agenda item 5 then is the standard revenue budget monitoring report for the resource, and as the Chair said, reflects the period to the 7th of October, which is accounting period 5 of our financial year. Section 3 explains this as the second report for the year, and it notes the details for the resource are shown in Appendix A, with variance explanations across the individual services in Appendices B to H. Section 5 of your report details the financial implications, and specifically Section 5.1 notes that the resource is showing a break-even position as at the end of October, the 7th of October, and is also forecasting a break-even position to the end of the financial year. Section 5.2 notes that there are environments included in the appendices as appropriate across the services, which are proposed for member approval, and in the main these reflect realignments of budget to better reflect the service delivery in the current year. So if I can refer members back to the recommendations in Section 2 and ask that the break-even position on the resources revenue budget detailed in Appendix A and the break-even forecast to the year end be noted, and that the proposed environments be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we approve this report?
I'll second the report.
Any questions or comments regarding this? No. Item 6, Capital Budget Monitoring 22-23, pages 41 to 44. Back to you again, Lorraine, please.
Thanks, Chair. So this is again a standard report, but this time for the capital programme, and again taking us to the 7th of October, accounting period 7. Section 3 gives the background to report and explains how the budget is based on the overall capital programme for 22-23, which was presented to the Executive Committee at its meeting back in June, and there's been no change to the resources budget since then, since the last report to this committee. Section 5.5 details the financial implications as usual, and Section 5.1 notes that the resources total capital programme for the year is £3.695 million. Section 5.2 notes that the anticipated spend was 1.944, with actual spend incurred to the 7th of October of 2.093 million. So spend is ahead of profile to the tune of about 149,000, just reflecting the timing of payments made only. If I can refer committee back to the recommendations in section 2 and ask that the committee note that the Finance and Corporate Resources budget of 3.695 million and spend to the 7th of October of 2.903 be noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Lorraine. Any questions regarding this? Can we just approve the report?
I'll second the report, Chair.
Thank you. Item 7, Finance and Corporate Resources Workforce Monitoring, July and August 2022, pages 45 to 52 in your pack. Kay, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be very familiar with this report. It's the workforce monitoring covering the summer period, July and August, and this report is covering finance and corporate resources. In terms of the content, I'll just draw your attention to the absence statistics in section 4. So the most recent absence figure for the resource was August, and that was 4.1%, and that's giving the resource a projected figure of 3.7% absence for the year. As you would expect, there's a bit of occupational health activity on the back of that. In 4.2 details, we had 40 referrals over the period. In terms of the other contents of the report, we did have 11 leavers over the period, and we'll be having a good look at the turnover rates across all of the resources, but indeed we'll have a look at our own as well. And just asking for the committee to note the content of this report.
Thanks, Kay. Do we have any questions to Kay? No. Can we approve the report?
I'll second the report, Chair.
Thank you. Item 8, Council-wide Workforce Monitoring, July and August 2022, pages 53 to 74 in your pack. Kay, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is obviously the much meatier version of the Workforce Monitoring Report, this time covering the whole of the Council for the same period. So in terms of the Council's absence rate for August, that's sitting at 4.4%, and that's given us a projected figure for the year for the whole Council at 6.1%. In terms of the main reasons for absence, those are psychological and respiratory, but probably of note within the bullets in section 4 would also be the increase in terms of stomach, bowel, blood and metabolic disorders. So a lot of stomach bugs over the period as well. Section 5 takes you through the substantial occupational health activity that was round about that, and I think contained within the occupational health information of note is the physiotherapy treatment, and 71% of those undertaking physiotherapy treatment remained at work whilst undertaking that support. In terms of section 6, accidents and incidents, we've got an increase in comparison with last year, and that's predominantly around about the minor accidents and incidents, but perhaps reflective of more activity taking place, but also a greater encouragement around about reporting. Section 8 takes you through analysis of leavers and exit interviews, and I am bringing to Council's attention the turnover rates across the piece. So over this period it's 1.2%, and we're getting a projected annual labour turnover figure of 5.4%, probably quite reflective of what's happening across Scotland. Similarly, other authorities are feeling the same increase in turnover figures. But we are keeping a track and carrying out exit interviews where we can in relation to those. In terms of recruitment, so we have got people leaving, but equally we've got lots of people applying for jobs. So we've got just over 3,500 applications over the period, and you can see in the report the statistics round about the various categories and performance in that area. We will be having a close look particularly at the applicants from a black and ethnic minority background, and also those who are veteran applicants, to see what we can improve within there to try and get a better success rate. Happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Kay. Mo, can you... Yep, Mo, please.
But the first thing I would say is that I did email Kay to forewarn her about the questions I was going to ask, so that hopefully she's got some of the answers there. I'm looking at the figures for application success rate, and I'm really disappointed to see, even though we've been working really hard with Equity Group and everything else, that we've got total number of applicants that have been successful, that are veterans, for instance, 0%. And last year was the exact same. So the work that's been done for the veterans doesn't seem to be working. We need to change something about this, because we can't keep having the same result over and over again and not find out what's the cause of it. Looking at black and minorities, this year it's 6% from applicants, and the white applicants 17%. That's nearly 1 in 3 chance of less of a minority getting a job there. And last year's figures, it's 4%, and 14 was even worse. The thing is that if this was a one-off glitch, I can understand. And you know, the data is down to the people that have been applying for the job and everything else. But the problem with me is the fact is that this is constant, and I have grave concerns about this. I know that I'm chair of Equity, and we will be taking this on. The questions I have for Kay are, number one, the Equity Group in the last term put forward proposals for training for the officers. So what is the training being done? What is the percentage of the officers that have done the training, and what percentage haven't? The community councils, number two, the community councils and the councillors, has that been forwarded, and how many have done that as well? Even though it's not mandatory for community councils, but with the fact that they are dealing with grants and everything else, then that would be beneficial for them. Have they received any messaging for that at all? Then if I could come back afterwards.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Razak. Apologies, I thought those questions were aimed for the Equal Opportunities Forum, particularly round about the community councils, etc., where we can have, I think, a lot more discussion round about. So I have requested the information, but I don't have it back yet.
Okay. Thank you. We will be taking this up in the qualities. But I don't believe this is acceptable. This has been several years. We've been discussing this, and we've had no change. We had very, very little change. I can't say no change. We've had very little change, and we just need to have a look at this and see what we're doing wrong or what else we can do to try and change things, because it can't be acceptable that black and ethnic minorities and veterans applications have got such a poor success rate. There needs to be something to be done. Thank you.
Mary Donnelly, please.
Echoed all the points that Mo has made. I think it is something's not right in regards to the veterans. Mo made the point in regards to the black and minority groups, and there's something clearly that we're not getting right. I've went back a year, and I look at September the 7th in the committee. 26 applied for the veterans, 14 were shortlisted, again, none appointed. February the 9th, committee 43 applied, 24 shortlisted for veterans, and none were appointed. The total from today's figures in September the 1st, 2021, there have been 147 applications from veterans, 81 shortlisted, and none appointed. There is something clearly wrong with our system of vetting and bringing people forward. It has to be clear. I'm not putting it at your door, by the way, but I think we do need to really investigate this in order to ensure that we are bringing veterans forward for interview and, more importantly, getting them appointed. And that goes for the black and minority ethnic groups as well. We need to be reflecting what's out there in the community, and quite clearly these figures are showing we do not reflect it. We reflect the white male, and I thought we'd moved on for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Obviously, we will have a much fuller discussion in the Equal Opportunities Forum, and I have requested the information to look back at the relatively small number of veteran applicants to see what we can glean from the applications. I do know from having spoken to colleagues elsewhere, what they can see sometimes in veteran applications is an assumption that people know what a particular terminology means in it, and when they're putting it in their application form. So we're going to have a look and see if we've got the same issue there, in which case we can support applicants and recruiting managers better in that. We did have a more in-depth look at the 14 you'd mentioned from previously, and I think I'd reported back already. I think we had a fair number that were invited for interview and then didn't come along. Again, I'm not sure how representative that is across our general applications, but it is a bit of a feature that in the current climate, people are applying for multiple jobs at the one time, and therefore if they're being called more quickly for another rather than ours, that may explain why they've not particularly appeared. In terms of representation, I would just remind folk that in terms of where we are at against the working population that's available, we are ahead of that in comparison with the last census. Obviously, we're waiting for more detail round about the most recent one, and I think it'll be interesting to see the analysis round about that, so we can see how reflective that is of our working population as a whole. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Gladys Ferguson-Miller, please.
Hi, Chair. Thanks very much. It's just really a formatting issue that I just wanted to raise, and it's in page 55, 8.2, the famous analysis of leavers. It mentions 126 leavers were recorded, and we only managed 38% exit interviews, and I just thought we should really have the numbers rather than a percentage, because if you look at item 7 and the finance and corporate workforce monitoring figures, it actually mentions 11 leavers and 4 exit interviews. Although saying that, it says 4 the word 4. So just a formatting issue, and it would just be nice if I had the numbers as we do have in the finance and corporate. Thank you, Chair.
That's probably a simple issue to address. I can do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Margaret Cooper, please.
We're not all on the Equal Opportunities Forum, so we don't all get the opportunity to have the in-depth discussion that Kay's referring to. I've got concerns, and I hope I put this the right way. I would have thought that when people were applying for a job, were applying on a level playing field. We have a pro forma which everybody completes, and there are certain boxes that are ticked, and there's an opportunity there saying that we are hoping to interview people that are veterans, etc. We also have a profile for the job and a job description. And that profile applies to everyone, I would hope, that applies for the job. So it's a skills-based, usually type interview where we're matching up the skills of the person to the job that's available. And I would hope that because someone has a particular label, we're overlooking that skills-based profile and we're ensuring that that person may get a job over someone else. It's just a strong feeling I have that it should be a level playing field. Yes, we should be encouraging people from Black and ethnic minorities and people who are war veterans to apply. We should be assisting them if they're struggling with the completion of the application form and the types of terminology that we're using. But the skills base is there for the job, and the person that's applying, regardless of who they are, should have the skills that are required for that job. Now, I'm wondering when we're quoting these figures here about people not getting a job, if the reason is that they didn't match that skills profile. That, you know, I've sat in hundreds of interview panels and I've always been of the view it's the best person for the job, regardless of anything else. And, you know, I just wonder how much of that is an influence on people not achieving a positive outcome, that they just weren't skills matched and they just didn't come over well in the interview and just weren't actually the right person for the job. I do understand that there are issues in regard to completion of application forms, maybe understanding terminology, but I would not like to think that that would be a discriminatory factor. But neither would I like to think that if we had given that assistance, that someone was actually pushed forward for the job, regardless of what the interview panel thought on the day and how their skills base matched up to the job. I've tried to put that as sensitively as I can because I've got absolutely no prejudices in any way about any particular group of people or applicants for jobs. Never have had, and as I say, I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of times, and it's always been looking positively for the best person for the job. And I just wondered if Kay could comment on that.
Thanks, Kay, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Cooper. So, by the time you get to interview, you should always be appointing the best person for the job on the day. Just to remind people, there are certain, so for example, for the disabled candidates, we do run an interview guarantee scheme. So we are looking for those particular candidates to display the essential criteria for the post, and if they do, they are guaranteed an interview, and that really should bring forward more of candidates in that particular category into the interview process. But once you get into an interview process, then it's the best candidate who most closely matches the requirement of the post and performs on the day who is successful in getting the job. Hopefully I put that as succinctly as possible. And you're right, there will be some elements where people need more support in completing application forms, but we do have set criteria for roles that we have across the piece. And the comment round about veterans in particular is that other colleagues elsewhere in Scotland have observed sometimes there's a little bit of a shortcut about how they express their skills and experience, that then makes it a bit more tricky for people to identify that as part of, does that match our essential criteria? So the numbers are small enough so we can have a good look at them, but in essence, at the end of the day, the best candidate will be appointed into the role. Thank you, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Councillor Cowan, please.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I have a couple of brief points. First of all, I fully accept that veterans and BAME candidates should be given a helping hand. They've got enough to contend with, and daily. That I think that they should be helped as much as possible to be successful at interviews. not at the cost of anyone else, of course, but I do think they need a bit more support. And so my question really to Kay is, do we use any outside agencies to help with our recruitment of veterans? I know that there's a recruitment forces recruitment service which helps veterans and teaches them, I suppose, how to conduct themselves at interviews, because the sort of civvy street terminology is difficult for them sometimes. So do we have an outside agency that we employ, or does the council just do all its recruitment in-house? Thanks.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Cowan. No, we don't employ an external agency to do recruitment for us, but we do make contact with all sorts of organisations to provide support, assistance, advice, some research into how we can better assist a range of applicants be successful in getting into council roles. So we do engage with a lot of different agencies. Helpfully, in relation to the veterans, there's such a small number in there that we can look very individually at the application forms and see what we can glean for ourselves. But of course, we'll reach out to those agencies to try and get any support, and absolutely kind of refer applicants back. Also, if they need support through the veterans agencies. Let's say that they're a small enough number, so we can really take a deep dive into that.
Mo Razak, please.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'm not concerned about the last census and under working population. I'm just working on the number of applications made and the success rate from the applications. And the reason for that is that the statistics I'm looking at rather than anything else. In reply to Councillor Cooper, at no point have I spoken about anything like positive discrimination, which I don't agree with, and I would never back. But what I'm looking for, and you did say that you were looking for a level playing field. Now, if you look back at the statistics for every time has never been parity between the white applicants and the black ethnic minority applicants. Even from this year's statistic to last year's statistic, let me repeat it again, the success rate from applicants was 4% for minorities and 14% for white. And for this year, 6% and 17%. There is a disparity there, and there's been a disparity for years, and it's not just recently. This has been going on for a good while, and every time I've been bringing this subject up. So I do want a level playing field. I want everyone to have the same chance. But to me, it looks like there's something wrong there, because it doesn't feel like everybody's having the same chance. And that's where my problem is. The other one that was spoken about was skills based. Anyone applying that going through the interview, surely to God then that this would be on skills based anyway. But then is there an assumption being made that the black minorities or the veterans also haven't got the skills for the jobs? And again, if that's the case, let's get the evidence out to prove it. But so far, like I said, even in the equity group and in the qualities committee as well, is that nobody, and absolutely nobody, is looking for positive discrimination. What they are looking for is a level playing field. And just now, it's just questions being asked to say, why is there a disparity? And why is there a continuing disparity in the figures year in, year out? And I've looked at the paperwork for the past 10 years, and it's been exact same issues. And for someone to turn around and say that, oh, well, it could be a skills level based on this, they don't match the criteria for that. I can understand that for maybe a couple of years, a year, maybe 2 years, maybe for a couple of periods, but not over 10 years. That, last I've said before, the statistics don't lie. Thank you.
Gladys Ferguson-Miller, please.
Chair, I don't agree with what Councillor Cooper said about the candidates. I mean, we wouldn't expect a candidate with no accounting experience to be successful as a senior accountant. However, we are asking, as Kay quite rightly mentioned, that veterans and our BME candidates, they clearly need more support. The BME candidates over a year, there was 544 applicants, 209 of them shortlisted and only 42 appointed. And as Councillor Donnelly read out on the veterans, 147 over a year, 81 shortlisted and none appointed. So I agree with Councillor Razak. We're talking about a fair playing field, and there may be just some support that we need to lend to these candidates over a period of a year. I think it's not looking very good. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Ferguson-Miller. Could we have Councillor Cooper, please?
Yeah, I just want to come back to one or two things that Mo said. I have absolutely no objections to people that are struggling to complete applications that are veteran or from the Black and ethnic minority community being given support. In fact, I would expect them to be given support, as I would anybody with a disability, etc. But I cannot agree with Mo that statistics don't tell a lie. Statistics can be shaped and framed to say whatever you want them to say. And it's what underlies the statistics that's the important part of the issue to try and resolve this. So from a strategic point of view, I feel that if we have that type of statistic, we then need to take it down one or two levels, and we need to go back and look at the application forums. We need to look at what the interviewers have said about the interviewees, because forums are completed in regard to that. We need to glean whether there's some similarity coming through in the people that are unsuccessful, and perhaps that would shine a light on where we need to tackle certain issues for anyone that's applying for a job. Is it the terminology it's used? Is it the format of the interview? How did people respond to whatever type of interview they were offered? And I think we need to go below the statistics to see where people are failing at interview. And that then, as I say, shines a light on any support that can be offered to these particular individuals. And I really do still say it at the end of the day, if they get through to the final interview, we're looking at a level playing field, because everybody's passed the test to get to that stage. And from there on in, we need to take a look at what happened at the interview that these people weren't successful. And perhaps Kay's doing some of that, but I think the bald figures are not good enough. We need more than that to try to resolve these issues. Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to take the next two, and that's it. I think we've had a robust discussion regarding this. So, Councillor Donnelly, please.
Echo a lot of the points that has been made, and I think someone had made the point earlier. Who is the recruit? Do we just in-house recruit, or is there like veterans that we could go to and seek guidance and help? And I think with the Black and ethnic minorities, I think we did seek further afield guidance and advice. But to tell me there is no one being recruited from the veterans, that worries me. I've been involved in this issue for a long number of years. I think I'm going to 40 years actually. And I do want to tap into, are we facing institutionalised bias that we as officers, we as councillors need to address and make sure, because that doesn't go away overnight. It stays and it is there. So we need to make sure that we have removed all the negatives in order to encourage people coming forward, is the main point, but also having a fair crack at the whip when they come forward for interview. Thank you. And maybe it is looking at another recruitment agency to give us that advice or help. I don't know. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor McGeever, please, and you're the final one in this section. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair, and I'll keep it as brief as possible. I'm grateful to Kay for the efforts to understand the factors behind the statistics. I certainly share a lot of the concerns that have been raised, and I won't repeat them. 5 years ago, I proposed that this council introduce a veterans guaranteed interview scheme, and I was glad that that got cross-party support at the time. And that was based on, it followed a story of, not at this authority but somewhere else, where a captain who'd led about 100 soldiers into battle in Afghanistan was rejected for a job at a different local authority because he wasn't able to provide leadership experience. So I think it shows that there can be issues in recruitment processes that, you know, can lead to absurdities. And I think it's worth mentioning very briefly, and this is the only reason I want to speak now, is to say that we do want to see the best person, the best applicant for every job appointed to it, regardless of any other factor. And the concern that a lot of us have is that the statistics indicate we might not be achieving that, and that ultimately is not only bad for the applicants and our communities, it's bad for everyone who uses our services because they're not benefiting from the best possible staff. And that's no criticism I should have of the staff we do have, they're excellent. We're dealing with very large numbers over a prolonged period of time, and it has consistent patterns, which does give the statistics weight. And for that reason, I'm very glad that Kay will look into it and try and give us some context and more evidence about the specific factors that might be at play this time. And I think it's right that we do look at that going forward. So I just want to get that on the record. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. Kay will take this on board and will report back in due course. Yes, thank you. Can we approve the report?
Happy to second the report.
Okay. Next item is Treasury Management Activity, the second quarter report, pages 75 to 82 in your pack. And back to you, Lorraine.
Thank you, Chair. So agenda item 9 is the standard Treasury Management Activity Report, and it's the second quarterly report for this current financial year. Section 4 looks at market performance and notes the current and anticipated interest rates that we are being advised of. Debt and borrowing is covered in Section 5 of your paper, and Table 1 shows the movement in borrowing to the end of September. In Section 5.4, we note that we've taken borrowing of 86.7 million to the end of September, with details on that in Table 2. Investment activity then is detailed in Section 6 of the report, and Table 3 shows where we have deposited council monies to the end of September and also the relevant interest rates. In terms of deposits made, management of risk is clearly an important issue, and that's detailed in Section 7 of the report. As you'll be aware, the annual investment strategy approved in February 22 confirms how risk would be managed, and part of that approach is how we look at counterparties we deposit with and the requirement to meet minimum credit ratings with 3 main credit agencies. So in tables 4, 5 and 6 of the report, you can see the rating agencies and where we've deposited funds. And section 7.5 notes that over 94% of deposits have been made with counterparties with a very high credit quality, being the DMO, the UK Government and other local authorities. Section 8 then goes on to cover our next quarter investment plans and quite simply notes that the current investment framework will be continued into the next quarter, so no change there. Section 9 notes the Treasury Management indicators that we are required to monitor, and these include limits for debt and limits on the maturity structure of borrowing. So Table 7 then shows the operational and authorised limits for external debt, along with the minimum headroom and the headroom at the end of September for your information. And the table shows that we've not breached the authorised limits. Finally, Table 8 shows that the limits on the maturity structure of borrowing, and again shows the upper limits on each of them have not been breached during the period to the end of September. And really, at that point, I'd be looking to refer committee back to the recommendation in section 2, and that's simply to note the content of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Lorraine. Any questions regarding this? Councillor Allison.
Just a very quick one, Lorraine. Are we on fixed or variable rates of interest?
Thanks. We've got fixed rates for the borrowing that we've undertaken, so the range is shown in one of the tables in the report, if I can find it for you. Yep, so we know what we're paying, basically.
With the expectation that interest rates are rising and an expectation that we're needing to borrow, is it another 240 million? Should we not be taking that out? We're needing it as quickly as possible to negate the increase in interest rates.
I understand your question, Councillor. What we're looking at is we're looking to manage the interest rate risk, knowing that the predictions at the moment are the interest rates will continue to rise, but we expect them to start to come back down again into the first quarter of the next financial year. So we're looking at our reserve balances, and if we have to, in terms of our cash position, we would maybe take some temporary borrowing from other local authorities at a lower rate. So we're looking at a whole raft of ideas in terms of trying to manage that over the piece.
I'm sure she will be. Anyway, if there's no other questions, can we agree to approve the report?
I'll second the report, Chair.
Next item is revenue collection and approval for write-offs, which is pages 83 to 88. And Craig, could you speak to this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The report advises committee of the collection performance at the end of September, and also the current position in respect to the business rates incentivisation scheme, and finally will seek approval for write-offs. Section 4 of the report covers the current year collection performance. In terms of council tax, we're currently ahead of target by 0.03%, ahead of target for non-domestic rates by 0.1%. In respect to sundry debt collection, we're marginally behind target by 0.1. Section 5 covers the arrear collection performance. More information again within the second table of Appendix 1. Again, just going through the three income streams there. In respect of council tax, we're ahead of target by 0.5%. In terms of non-domestic rates, ahead of target by only 15%. And in terms of sundry debt, ahead of target by just £8,000 or 0.1%. Section 6 just advises the current position in respect of BRIS, and essentially there's been an update since the last update was provided to committee, and essentially awaiting further advice and instruction from Scottish Government in that respect. Section 7 details the proposals for write-off for committee's consideration today. I'll draw your attention to section 7.5 and notes the sundry debt totals of nearly £11,500, with Appendix 2 providing a breakdown over the categories, and that fulfils a request from committee at the last meeting to provide further information in respect to that particular debt stream. Paragraphs 7.6 and 7.8 cover the position in respect of school meal debt, with a proposal there to include write-offs totalling nearly £68,000, covering the three categories previously explained in the report went to Executive Committee on the 21st of September. And with emphasising that work is continuing within education resources, amongst obviously the schools estate, to review all the remaining amounts that are currently owed for school meals. That said, and obviously the utmost sensitivity, and it's expected that further write-offs will come to committee for consideration for write-off in due course. So I can refer committee back to section 2 in the recommendations, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Councillor Loudon, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Craig, for going through that. First of all, thank you for Appendix 2 and welcome the breakdown which requested at the last committee of that sundry debt write-off. That's really useful to see. And also, of course, to welcome the write-off of school meal debt, which we'd asked for previously at section 2.1. And I'll not go over all of the reasons why we had asked for that again, but I really appreciate seeing that in there. And one question related to that, which is in section 7.8. I appreciate there, Craig, that you had said that there might be further write-offs coming, and I know that education will indeed handle that in a sensitive fashion. I just wondered what the phrasing of that meant at 7.8, where it says where the write-off is deemed appropriate. If we could have a wee bit more on that, please.
Certainly, Councillor. I mean, essentially, this does rely upon the work within education and obviously the relationships with individual families, and essentially it takes things to a kind of personal level, but obviously the schools are best placed to have that discussion about individual circumstances, the pressures households are under, but obviously accepting some households will be able to continue to pay for school meal provision. So it's one obviously that education are progressing. As I mentioned earlier, it does very much rely upon education colleagues having those relationships with parents and households. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Could I come back in for a second?
Yes, indeed.
Thanks. So just will we have further updates to this committee about any more debt that's written off under those sort of circumstances?
Yes, absolutely. All right, obviously have to come through Finance and Corporate Resources Committee for approval, so that's certainly be the intention, Councillor.
Right, great. Thanks very much, Craig. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cowan.
Thanks, Chair. Just a very small point. First of all, I'm referencing 7.6 in this report about the housing, the rent arrears. First of all, I want to commend you on having factoring arrears of £19.60. My goodness, that's fantastic. Somebody's gathering that in well. But the very small point I wanted to make is the write-off for former tenant rent arrears of just over £100,000. I don't see any dates for that. Could you tell me what time span that covers? I see dates for some of the other figures, but I don't see anything for the rent arrears, and I just wondered what period that covers. Thanks.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks for the question there, Councillor. I can certainly look at what the information we hold in respect of that. My expectation would that will cover a range of financial years, potentially some debt that's prescribed, or it could well be the former tenant could be deceased, for example. So it effectively covers a range of circumstances, and I'd also say a range of financial years.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Can we agree the report?
I'll second the report, Chair.
Thank you. Item 11, 24-hour control centre, additional staffing. Excuse me, pages 89 to 92. Craig, please.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, the purpose of the report is to request approval from committee to make permanent two existing temporary call centre assistant posts within the 24-hour control centre that operates within the resource. Just in terms of some background for committee, the control centre is based at Pollock Avenue, Hamilton. It provides two key and essential services to residents, one being the alarm receiving centre service and the other one also being the out-of-hours emergency service. The alarm receiving centre service receives calls or activations from social work service users requiring assistance through the community alarm system. And the out-of-hours emergency service receives calls in relation to any council service out with normal office hours. Section 4 covers the current staffing position, comprises 2 team leaders, 21 call service assistants, 1 admin assistant and 9 sessional casual staff. And they essentially work over a pattern of 3 shifts. In addition to that, we also had in place a contract with Tunstall Healthcare Limited for the provision of staffing support from the alarm receiving centre service in the event of the service experiencing a shortage of staff for the various rotas that we have in place. In September of last year, Tunstall Healthcare provided notice to the Council they're withdrawing their support service from the 1st of January 22 due to significant challenges they were experiencing in recruitment and retention. So as a direct result of that, we took some action to take on 2 additional full-time members of staff on a temporary basis, covering the period 1st of January to 31st of December this year. In effect, that offset the impact of the withdrawal of support from Tunstall and also reduced the need for overtime within the service. So in effect, the 2 members of staff has provided essential cover previously provided by Tunstall and also greater stability to the rota systems we have in operation within the service. Section 5 confirms employee implications and obviously the costs there, including on costs. In terms of financial implications, just to confirm that the cost additional to employees can be met from existing budgets within finance transactions. And the Fair Committee back to the recommendations, the 2 existing temporary call centre assistant posts, as detailed in section 5 of the report, be made permanent and added to the establishment of the 24-hour control centre within the resource. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson-Miller, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Craig, do you feel that we can probably deliver a better service, given that this is social work out of hours and the community alarm? I was just wondering if there has been issues or any complaints in the past, and happy that it is coming in-house.
Yeah, just a point of clarification there, Councillor. This service obviously is entirely in-house. There were just some occasions where effectively there were times we did have to transfer or take on additional support from Tunstall for what was termed the kind of disaster recovery support service. I think in terms of the broader benefits, there's no real change to the services experienced by residents. Calls that come into the alarm receiving centre have to be actioned, given obviously the important nature of these calls. So there's no notion that these calls are not being answered. So I think effectively if there's a kind of broader benefit is around just having a more consistent staffing resource, which makes obviously you deliver the service more straightforward, but effectively it takes away, if you like, just some of the occasional pinch points with experience. When obviously there was from time to time some issues in terms of staffing cover, hence the reason we then would have to turn to Tunstall on occasions. But I say just now, a service that works very well, provides a very important service to a large number of residents across South Lanarkshire.
Thanks, Craig. Chair, can I have a supplementary?
Yes, indeed.
Craig, is 2 members of staff, do you feel that that's enough, or is it going to be just a dipping the toe in the water at the moment to see, you know, if 2 is going to give you the capacity that you need for this service?
Yeah, and obviously we've ran with the 2 temporary members of staff now for close on 11 months, and it's obviously reflecting on that experience allows us to bring this report to committee with a view to then seeking approval to make the arrangement permanent. So it's one that has worked well. Obviously it's something to keep under review to make sure we're obviously providing a high quality service there.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Donnelly, please. Sorry, Councillor Donnelly.
Craig, I was just interested to note, because I've worked in the care field and worked in the out-of-hours services and things, and you've outlined the point about 2 members of staff. Is it just 1 member of staff that's going out to a client that's maybe fallen, or to answer the alarm call, or do we have, is it 2 people going out to the client based on the rota?
Yeah, thanks for your question there. The report itself just concerns the operation of the alarm receiving centre in Pollock Avenue, which deals with the incoming calls and activations. The actual responder service is something distinct from that. It operates within social work resources.
Can I come back, Chair?
Yes, indeed.
So the point that you're making is just the administration of running that service at Pollock Avenue?
It's essentially the call handling service. It's dealing with incoming calls, the activations from alarms, etc. And essentially the service in Pollock Avenue that then deal with that, they gauge what is required. Then it may well be the responder service is called upon. It may well be they have to revert to emergency services, such as the fire service, if it's a smoke alarm that's been activated.
Right, yeah. Thanks for that.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, can we approve the report?
Happy to second the report, Chair.
As the items 12 to 15 are for noting, can I suggest that we accept these en masse unless anybody has any riveting questions that they would like to ask? Councillor Cowan.
Hi. I have a wee point that I wanted to ask on item 12 on the agenda. Can't guarantee it'll be riveting, but I do have a question or two. So if you don't mind just going over item 12, please.
If you bear with us, we need now to have a 5-minute break. Okay, thank you. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you for your patience. Councillor Cowan, could you put your question forward, please?
Yeah, of course. It's a couple of sort of general questions around retirement and the council's how they handle retirement, in particular early retirement. So it's two questions, probably I think to Kay. I just wondered, do we offer, as a council, do we offer any incentives for folk looking to retire early for them to stay on? This is really given the recruitment difficulties that we have across all council resources. So I wondered if we encourage people to stay on a wee bit longer where possible. And my second point is, do we ever go back to these experienced staff who have retired and re-employ them on a short-term contract to cover, for example, long-term sick or maternity leave or that sort of thing? So it was really just a wee bit of information about how we handle that area. Thank you.
Okay, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that question. In terms of offering incentive for people to stay on, no, we don't do that. And we do have people who stay on quite long in terms of continuing to work with us past what would have been considered previously a normal retirement age or even state pension age at this point in time. As you would expect, over the pandemic, we did put out a call actually to a lot of individuals who had recently retired to see if they would come back in and help us out. It's probably quite a limited pool in terms of the number who would take up that opportunity. Generally, when people are retiring, it's because they want to rest and perhaps do something different with their lives. We do have retired teachers, for example, who would go on to provide supply, and they might do that here or they might do that in other authorities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, if I could just comment that I know that Kay mentioned that as happening during the pandemic, but I just feel that it's possibly something that we could maybe look at, because these, as I say, are experienced staff who could hit the ground running, and given, as I say, the recruitment difficulties that we're having, it might be worth offering an incentive even on the back of that. I think we do need to look at how we deal with our recruitment, because, as I say, we do have these problems throughout the council. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I would say in terms of incentives, we always look at that very, very carefully, because there can be an unequal impact there. But we do look at trying to persuade people in key areas to perhaps stay on a little bit longer when we need them. And generally speaking, if people are interested in coming back, we have had people back that can apply for roles. But in terms of incentive, I've not really heard of any other authorities doing that in terms of hanging on to their individuals, or indeed given an incentive to come back. I mean, we've had a fair chat nationally about things like market incentives, etc. And again, there's a lot of caution around about that because of the equalities impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson-Miller, please.
Chair, it's a point of order really in relation to your statement about if there are any more riveting questions. It's our role as elected members to query any points that we have in these papers, and with these meetings being live streamed, the public, I'm sure the citizens would welcome them and the clarifications that come out of these questions. And I think comments like that from a chair could really intimidate newer councillors from coming forward with queries.
Councillor Ferguson-Miller, it was mainly to do with the items for noting, which were 12 to 15, and I was acutely aware that we were approaching the time where we were having to have a 5-minute break, which we have done. So I'm sorry if I've offended anyone. It wasn't intentional. Does anyone have any other questions, or can we accept items 12 to 15 en masse? I don't have any questions here, don't have any questions in the room. I have no items of urgent business. Can I thank everyone for their attendance here this afternoon, and I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.